Let's talk about what's happening in Tennessee. We listen. We've talked a lot about your state, usually in the same key of discussion that we use for the states of Florida, Texas, Mississippi, things of that nature. And you all recently had some legislation passed that was under the umbrella of gun violence legislation, and
Mhm.
yet it failed. It seems like it has been an absolute failure, at least in implementation. Talk to us about what is happening in your state house, what is happening with gun violence, and with this effort to really suppress voices like yours.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Mississippi are in a race to the bottom, a race
Mm,
to the bottom as it relates to supporting those constituents of theirs to be able to live whole and full and well-meaning lives. It's a race to
mm,
the bottom when it comes to who can suppress the vote the most. They want to be 50th out of 50th. They want to ensure that the states that we are living in are quite literally the vestiges of the Confederacy.
mm,
And it is a really scary time to live in these states where supermajority Republican rule, in particular, but Republican rule and conservatives are wielding their power to silence dissent and also wielding their power to make us less safe and allow dangerousness to be the status quo. We have passed a law in our state that would allow for school systems to arm teachers. And this is the
mm,
most significant piece of legislation in response to the mass shooting that happened a year ago at the Covenant School. What world do we live in that the response to a mass shooting at a
mm.
school would be to allow more guns in school?
Yeah.
This is not sensible. This is dangerous and this is harmful. And thousands of people, thousands marched against it, sent emails, made phone calls to us as legislators to stop this, and they ignored it. And it's
Mm.
that difference, it's that ignoring of the people that persist in our state house and that is leading to terrible legislation and will lead to terrible outcomes for our community.
Talk to us about who are the folks that are doing the protesting. We've seen video footage of mothers, of children, of schools. We've seen what feels like a fairly representative cross section of the communities that are impacted by this legislation. But maybe that's false. Are we what who are the protesters, and what is it that they're demanding from the state house that, according to what outsiders see, they're absolutely not getting? Because passing a law that says teachers can carry guns in, I don't know, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, in order to prevent an armed shooter from coming in, that to me feels like it probably missed the mark with what the
Yeah,
people who were demanding change actually wanted.
completely. I mean, you have it to the point that parents who were whose children attended the Covenant School where the mass shooting happened were actually kicked out by state troopers from the vote related to
Wow.
this legislation. Like this is the length that those who are in positions of power in the Republican Party in Tennessee are willing to go. That even those who were victimized by this mass shooting were
Mm,
kicked out of the galleries so that they wouldn't be able to protest this legislation. It is an interracial, multi-generational, multi-socioeconomic movement for justice rooted in love that is building in the state of Tennessee to
mm,
fight against these bad laws and also recognizing the intersectionality of the problems that we see. You have Black folks and white folks, Asian folks. You have a lot of immigrants, a Latino community showing up. You have people who are more wealthy, people who are less wealthy, who are all using their time and their energy and their effort to say, we're going to take a stand to make Tennessee be all that it can be. And we know that the way that it is being run right now with white supremacy and white patriarchy at its heart and in its leadership with Cameron Sexton and William Lambert is wrong. It is immoral. It is unjust. And there is no way that we're going to become a more safe state. There's no way we're going to become a more just state if we continue to operate in this way. And so it is this amazing cross section of individuals across our state, from Memphis to Mound City to Gatlinburg, who are organizing and galvanizing and saying, no more, no more to this extremist and harmful, retaliatory, and useless way of legislating. No more to the status quo. We have to do something differently because gun violence is the number one killer of children in our state. And that requires us to do way more than listen to the Tennessee Firearms Association and the National Rifle
mm.
Association for talking points and for legislation.
It feels like with that level of energy, because it has been electrifying to see the footage coming out of the State House and seeing the protests gathered, it would seem to me that there should be more consideration from the Republican side of the House. And yet what we're seeing is that you have been silenced, your colleagues have been silenced repeatedly. I saw one video where one of you had been was not allowed back in the chamber, and it between that sort of very gross and very public, and they saying it with a full chest kind of way, between
Yeah.
that and the kicking out of those families, I'm wondering, why is there seems to be no fear that there will be any retribution, or in terms of being held accountable at the I almost said the box office, at the ballot box.
Mhm.
What is happening in the state that would allow the Republican Party to operate so what appears to be so comfortably? And does redistricting in any way play a role in squelching these voices?
I mean, redistricting and gerrymandering has everything to do with the
Mm,
situation that we are currently in.
okay.
Republicans gerrymandered the state House and the state Senate to give themselves a supermajority, despite the fact that only about 60% of people in the state of Tennessee would identify as Republican or conservative. The
Wow.
state legislature is over 77% in the House Republican. And in the 75%, and in the Senate over 80%. And so our politics in the General Assembly are skewing way more conservative than the state actually is. And that is leading to the proliferation of these terrible bills and legislation that you see happening time after time after time. And also, you're seeing the erosion of the democratic experiment because bills that are being passed, laws that are being passed at the local level, are then getting preempted. And so Jody Barrett passed a law this year that would preempt local governments from having extreme risk protection orders, despite the fact
Wait,
that
what?
Democrats tried to bring extreme risk protection orders statewide. None of the bills got heard in committee. None of them. They didn't even listen to them.
Mm,
And
mm,
now we're preempting local governments from being able to pass their own extreme risk protection orders. This is the way that white supremacy with power operates. And I have to make this clear, the ideology of white supremacy is harmful and dangerous in its own right and evil.
mm,
But white supremacy with power is the
mm.
greatest threat to American democracy and to Black people's lives that exist on this planet. This is the experience
I
that we
agree.
are having in Tennessee, that
Mm,
our lives are not being valued. And that is from the issue of gun violence, which we feel so intimately in District 86, in my district in Memphis and Shelby County, all the way to healthcare expansion. We've refused to expand Medicaid to 300,000 people. So you got folks dying on their way to the hospital. You have people who have illnesses who are in debt in perpetuity because they can't afford healthcare. In education, there's an attempt to have billionaires to come in and take over our system with private school vouchers.
yeah.
Our lives are not being valued. And this is what is leading to the greatest source of concern and worry for me and for, I think, a lot of people of good conscience and goodwill. But I have to tell you, the reality is we can go to the ballot box. And there
Mm,
are some seats like District 97 against John Gillespie, where there's an opportunity for people who are more progressive, for people who believe in the real ideals of freedom and liberty and justice for everybody, that we do have some opportunities to flip some seats. And we have a responsibility to hold Democrats accountable as well for advocating on behalf of the people, for not being quiet, for not quieting down, for not being silent in such a time as this, because these folks, they're never going to acknowledge the harm and the pain of what they do.
right.
We have to continue to hold that mirror up.
You know, as I watch you and Representative Jones and navigating this space, on the one hand, I'm extraordinarily proud. It's like, yes, we are in our community. You know, we love to see young people coming, and you're young to me, so you know, so I don't mean to. I'm not using that in a pejorative way. I'm just mean in terms of age
Appreciate
and chronology. It has been so like, yes, we know we can make it. Like we have the ability. The young people are going to save us, and yet I see how frustrated I get when I'm seeing, you know, one of you not being allowed into the chamber, or being expelled and having to navigate this, or having your microphone turned off when you're advocating and speaking on bills. And there was some, you know, there was one video where we were going to try to play, we couldn't squeeze it all in, of you being in the well, and they said, do you know why you're in the well? And you're like, yeah, basically because y'all trying to do a whole ass you didn't say whole ass, but you was basically like, y'all are engaging in the politics and the power and the weaponizing of white supremacy, and you were able to articulate that in a way that those of us who have been fighting and agitating for so many movements forward in terms of civics and advocacy, it makes us joyous. And yet at the same time, when I
Mhm.
see how your voices are able to be squelched, it's hard for me not to remember the end of Reconstruction. It's very
Mhm.
difficult for me not to remember what it was like for Black men, at that time only men, as elected officials after the Civil War, who after on the strength of over 80% of Black men who could register to vote doing so, on the strength of getting more than 2,000 Black elected officials into public office in the late 1800s, and then came the white supremacy and the white Christian nationalism coupled
Mhm.
with power, and that was ended. It was undone in very violent ways. You're not even 30 years old. When you
Mhm.
think about the role that you're playing and the fact that your ancestors played a similar role and what happened for them, how does that land for you?
Mhm. Well, I am only here because of the struggle of our ancestors and the work of those ancestor angels to not give up and to not give in, to not be bowed down, broken, or bent. And it is because of their struggle and their strive that I'm able to serve in the state house at all. It's
Mm,
because of the spirit of those ancestors that we continue to fight to end gun violence. It's in the spirit of ancestors that we fight for environmental and climate justice. It is because of those who came before that I know I am who I am and where I am. And it is not just those who survived the Middle Passage and those from the cotton fields and the tobacco plantations or the rice paddies, as my ancestors were in South Carolina, but as my grandmothers, God rest their souls, who believed in building a strong family and believed in reminding us that we are somebody and that somebodyness requires you to not only look at yourself and straighten up your back, but it also requires you to be a part of the community and fight for it.
that's
I was always told, never forget where you come from.
that's
And
right.
that was not people poking at you. It was folks saying, remember that we are the people who invested. We are the
Mm,
people who believed. We're the people who saw you before any of these cameras. We're the folks
that's right.
who saw you fighting for textbooks and stood alongside you in high school. And so I've never forgotten where I come from, and that we stand on the shoulders of those giants and on the shoulders of those ancestors who did not dream of becoming our martyrs,
Right.
right, to pray to, but they
That's
have
right.
become them.
Mm,
And Ta-Nehisi Coates, he says this. He says, in his book Between the World and Me, that there's an enslaved woman that we can picture whose light reflected, her eyes reflected in the light a particular way. She had a favorite color. She had a favorite flower. She was a whole person. We cannot forget that our people were oppressed. Their entire humanity was subjugated for the capitalistic exploitation of this country. And as you say, the political deprivation that came afterwards in Reconstruction, which is known, right, as the white lash,
right.
those
That's
moments
right.
of Black progress, after all we've been through,
Yep.
we still say we're going to build schools. We still say we're going to build churches. We still say we're going to do these things. And then there's a white lash. We,
Mm,
we, we get expelled from the legislature. We say, let's build this movement for justice rooted in love. And still there's this white lash. Well, nope, we're going to change the rules. You can't talk for this amount of time. You can't do these certain things. We're not going to listen to your bills, despite the fact that you say they tell us that you just need to pass a bill if you want to be effective, right?
mm,
Like it's the white lash to anything that looks like progress. And what also exists in that time that we just can never forget is Black persistence
yes.
amidst the white lash,
That's right.
amidst the corruption, amidst all those things. There's our persistence. And that's how we're still here. And I believe 7 generations from now, our descendants and unborn children are going to be grateful just as we are for those 7 generations before who did not yield.
I know that's right. How did you get here? Like, who? I know obviously you were raised by good people, but how did you get to this space where this is the fight that you're leading? Was this what you dreamed of doing when you were a little kid? I'm going to be an elected official and I'm going to wear a big afro to make
Yeah.
everybody recognize what time it is. How
Yeah.
did you come to sit in this space?
Yeah, well, the Afro's new. That came with the pandemic, but it actually came
I
as a
love
part of
it.
resistance, right? After
Mm,
George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery had been lynched, and I was working in an amazing nonprofit organization. We did a lot of work with corporations. I was like, this is going to be a form of resistance,
mm,
and it stuck with us. But
Yeah.
I give so much gratefulness first to God. I think my faith has been an extraordinary part of my life throughout my entire life. To my grandmothers, whom I mentioned, Eddie Mae Starks Pearson and Gwendolyn Griffin, and my parents, my mom, soon to be Dr. Kimberly Owens Pearson,
All right,
and
doctor.
Reverend Jason C. Pearson Sr. My parents had kids as teenagers. The year I was born, decided after hearing a sermon called Vision 2000 that they would really rebuild the future, and
Mm,
said, I'm going, my mother would go get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree first. Then my dad would go get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in
mm,
order to lift us out of poverty. And over my lifetime, 14 years, I watched them do and follow this exact plan, not without some bumps and some bruises in the road for sure. But I watched them implement this plan. And now, they're both consummate professionals. Like I said, my mom's earning a doctorate, and they've always prioritized being Black. It has
mm.
never been an accidental or secondary thought that they are Black African American descendants of enslaved people with a long history that stretches to the kings and the queens and the human beings on the continent of Africa. And they instilled that in me and each of my brothers. There's five of us. I'm the fourth one. And that has meant so much to me, having such a strong family unit that lifted me and that supported me, even when I was doing more radical things like going to the school board at 15 years old and saying, we can't get textbooks if you don't, we can't get college degrees if you don't give us textbooks.
Mm.
And then in this moment in time, having that family structure and growing the family, I have an amazing fiance, Oceanae Art Gilliam, and we have a little dog, Curly Gurley. Fortunately, Oceanae has a master's in public policy from UCLA. She's going to law school this summer, and having a strong partner in this entire journey from running for office to being elected and having to experience what we have experienced has made the world of difference, because you realize it's not just the words, you are not alone. It's very helpful and amazing to have someone who's there with you,
Yeah.
so that I have not been journeying alone. And lastly, and definitely not least, is our team and community. We have a strong team. My entire senior leadership are Black women, that really help to make sure that everything works and functions and is done to a level of excellence that makes our community and our district proud. But there's no happier place for me than to be in District 86, where there's so much love, there's so much hope, there's so much possibility, there's so much opportunity, and there's a spirit of the people that's just determined.
Yeah.
And that determined and that determination is something that sits within in me and lives within me when we are up against quite literally white supremacists and racists every day at the General Assembly.
We have just about 30 seconds left. So this is probably an unfair question, but do you, as you see what's happening with protests on college campuses, any words of advice, insight? You sound like you come from a history of protest. Well, we see how you protest, and it's amazing. Any words for folks who are doing what they can as young people to live out their truths on college campuses all across the nation?
Yes, I would say to the young folks, keep going,
Mm,
organize, mobilize, and activate the people for the cause of justice. You do it in the way that fits the moment. You do it as peacefully and as safely as possible. But the reality is, this moment demands action. And
mm.
sitting on one's hands or on the sidelines at a time like this is not what we need to do. And we must remember the thousands of people who are dying and suffering every day in Gaza without food, without health care. And we have to make sure that we send money, not for bombs, but money to be a balm for the people and the children in Palestine.
I need to meet your parents. They raised you right, brother. This is tell your mama and your daddy. We all said thank you. We all said thank you.
Gotcha.
How can people connect with you, support your campaign, or any of the issues that you're working on? What's the best way for folks to connect with you beyond this show?
Thank you so much for asking. That's kind. Please contribute. Go to votejustinj.com, votejustinj.com. We are raising funds and resources because we are going to run again and launch our campaign on June 1st. And also go to at Justin J. Pearson on Instagram, Justin J. Pearson on Facebook, and at Real Justin J. Pearson on TikTok if you're there. And at Justin J. Pearson on Twitter if you're there. We're on all the platforms, and Ocean 8 does most of those things. So I
Shout
know
out to
that you're going to
Oceanae.
love it.
Shout out to Ocean doing the hard work. We
Yes.
appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time today. Best of luck to you. Best of luck
Thank
to you.
you. Let's keep
Thank you.
going.